Hello.
Hello.
All right. I want to welcome everyone to the first live Zoom AMA with the lovely authors from Sooner, Safer, Happier. Joining us today, we have, of course, John Smart, Simon Rauer, I think I probably pronounced your last name incorrectly, and Jolt Brand. We're very happy to have worked with them here at IT Rev to produce the Sooner, Safer, Happier book. And we're so happy for all you guys to be joining us for the book club. We hope you've been enjoying your time so far. And we've got lots still to come. So I'll just mention this one more time. We have questions from you guys that we collected over in the Slack. We'll be asking some of those, as well as some questions from us here at IT Rev. If you have additional questions, you may post them at any time over in the chat. And we'll get through as many as we can. If we have leftover, the authors might answer them over in Slack, or we'll pick them up in the next AMA. So here we go. So as I say, we're joined by the lovely authors of Sooner, Safer, Happier. Now, John and everyone, BVSSH, Better Value, Sooner, Safer, Happier. I mean, it's such a nice roll off the tongue, non-framework framework, right? It seems to encompass everything. But there's no way you came to this idea overnight. So I wonder if we could just start by you guys helping us understand what your journey was that brought you to understand this as the overarching way to work.
Yeah, so wind the clock back to 2015, and we, all of the authors, are at a large global traditional organization, and we embrace upon an agile transformation. We embark upon an agile transformation, and that was a mistake because we were doing agile, and the narrative effectively was, hi, my name's John and I'm here to make you do agile whether you like it or not. Obviously I wasn't saying that, but you could interpret it that way. And we realized by the end of 2015 that was a mistake, because we were measuring how agile are you. We weren't looking at the outcomes. And what we saw teams who were doing agile or doing DevOps, and they hadn't improved the business outcomes and they hadn't removed impediments. So we shifted into year 2 and we focused on the outcomes. Now we had already started measuring them, but we hadn't made it the headline. So we pivoted and we made it the headline. Originally it was actually better products faster, safer, happier. And then in an agile manner, we pivoted again. And rather than products, we made it value. And rather than faster, we made it sooner, because it isn't about fast feature factory. It's about sooner value, sooner learning. So that's how we pivoted to those words. I don't know, Jolt or Simon, if you want to add anything.
The one little anecdote I always like to add to this is our Better Products Faster actually came from a part of the bank whose initials were BPF. Am I allowed to mention the bank? I think I am these days. It was Barclaycard Partner Finance, and they'd come up with this sort of board that said BPF, Barclaycard Partner Finance, Better Products Faster. We're like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Let's steal that for the entire bank, and then it evolved.
Jolt, did you have anything to add there?
No, I think it's just an awesome journey. So I good memory and remember lots of elements to that journey, but definitely a number of times we learned that the journey we are on, that we need to pivot from. So it's just, the name was one, but many other things we learned and we pivoted.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of the beginner journey. I think as everyone can see, it took time. It took maybe a lot of missteps, a lot of failures, good failures that help you learn to come to this wonderful idea, which I like a lot. So I wanted to ask, just to get it a little timely, the last year has been unprecedented, of course, we all know this. And many of us have been faced with lots of new challenges. I wonder if you guys could share one of your own challenges from the last year and your learnings from it. Work related, personal related. I mean, probably work related, but open.
Simon or Joel, do you want to go?
I think what I learned and working with currently my current role, I'm a product owner working at Nationwide, and what I learned that how quickly many teams adopted to the new situation and achieve great outcomes in this situation. And many things which we thought it's going to be actually a problem because we need to work from home, and also the tension, and also the lockdowns, and also the family and social problems, that actually the teams could pivot, and they work together and achieve awesome outcomes. So we just ran awards nationwide, which is one of the big enabler, Chapter 8. And we had 40 plus nominations and great achievements and outcomes from many teams during this pandemic, and especially just pulling on one, which is working with mortgages and really complex systems anyways, but there were lots of unknowns, and what they predicted because of the pandemic gonna happen is actually many opposites happened, or even not even the opposite, but something orthogonal happened. So they needed to move really quickly, being in a lockdown situation, and mobilize and collaborate across many silos. And they pivoted ways of working while they are also serving their customers. So I've seen lots of positives. Besides all the negatives and the issues we're seeing in the world and families and everything.
And I think to add on that, or to echo what Jolt said, at the beginning of the pandemic, people seem to be at their best in terms of ways of working, like responding to a crisis, solving things quickly. The consistent message that, as I speak to different organizations, that I hear is, can we replicate the behavior that we had at the beginning of the pandemic the whole time, but without the crisis?
Yeah.
So, for example, people come together agnostic of their role, agnostic of how they're incentivized. They've got a very clear mission. So can we work like that the whole time? Not only that, but can we do it sustainably? That's another recurring conversation. One of the challenges with everybody working from home is home life and work life blur. The boundaries blur, and the feedback is that people are busier than ever, which is crazy when you think about it. Like, all of that time we used to spend commuting, where did that all go? Or getting on a plane. But somehow people are busier. So I think there's also this sustainability point, and actually you need to put a lot of effort into working sustainably, and and making sure that people take time out, and you delineate from home life, recharge, and work.
Absolutely. Thank you all. All right, let's go to some of the audience questions. I'm just going to post this first one over in the chat so that you can refer back to it if you would like. So it's in two parts. What is the proportion of complex emergent work versus complex and clear work in some of the bigger industries and public sectors? Industries as in GICS or similar. Probably much more complex work than people think. And part two is how much of this complex work is understood to be complex work and handled accordingly. Probably just a fraction. What do you guys think?
I can take a little of that. Yeah, I guess that is, it's pretty much a self-answering question. It's very much the case that a significant proportion of knowledge work is very much in the complex space in Cynefin. We see very little in the clear space. Liz Keogh, who is, I guess, Dave Snowden's representative on Earth as much as anything these days about Cynefin, says clear is stuff that children can do. It's more the complicated space that tends to be where people think things are with good practices and easily plannable. But actually, no, the questioner is very much right. More and more work in knowledge work is about sense, probe, respond, and adapt in an agile way.
And Johan, this is Johan's question, part 2, how much of this complex work is understood to be complex and handled accordingly? Probably just a fraction. Correct. Yes. This is the thinking error, I think, since the 1970s, with Prince in particular, and Prince 2, is not treating complex work as complex work. For anyone who's not familiar with the language that's being used here, this is language from Cynefin, sense-making framework, where clear is child's play, complicated is kind of repetitive, you need expertise, but there is causality, there is a link between cause and effect, things are knowable. And complex is unknowable, unique change, where there is no causality, so you need to act upon the system, and then chaos is chaos. So that's the language that we're using here. This is the big pivot as we go from the age of oil and mass production, where human endeavor was much more repetitive and much more knowable because people were doing the same thing repetitively, to now people with the fact that we can program robots and program machines to do repetitive tasks for us. Therefore, people are spending more of their time on unique work, which is not knowable, which is why we need to take an entirely different approach about speed to learning.
So you both agree that more work is complex and that most people don't recognize it as complex and treat it thus. So what recommendation would you have to help us as workers, to help leaders, etc., recognize and treat the work as complex?
I would say focus on the outcomes. So, because if you focus on the outcomes, for example, better, value, sooner, safer, happier, quality, value, flow, safety, and happiness, you focus on those and measure those and look at the trend over time. If complex, unique, unknowable work is being treated as if it's knowable, i.e. with a predetermined solution, determined at the point of knowing the least, a Gantt chart with all of the tasks predefined and status being at hitting milestones in the plan, you'll see that quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness will all be quite low.
Typically, as people know, it's often quality that gives. So people will go for a predefined outcome and a predefined date, and the thing they will throw out is quality, and probably, frankly, value is the next to go as well, because somebody determined 18 months ago that something might be valuable and they're pretty certain about it, and then they just keep on delivering that theory that they had 18 months ago and then throw it at their customers.
And I think, and actually just on Johan's question, I can see Johan's on. Feel free to type anything in the chat. Part of the question there, some of the bigger industries and public sectors. I don't know what GICS stands for, but I think actually public. It's from a regional perspective, from a UK perspective, public sector in the United Kingdom. There are pockets of awesome. There are parts of GDS, Government Digital Services. There's some fantastic examples of modern ways of working. And I did I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I did a site visit. It was really, really good. And then there are still parts which are more traditional. I think that applies to most companies.
All right, thank you guys. Let's see, okay. So next question from Slack. Under the umbrella of leadership and psychological safety, developed under Chapter 4, Anti-Pattern 4.2, it feels like if leaders beside inspiring, motivating, and guiding would also be those making decisions about employees' paths, both professional and financial, it will create a psychologically unsafe environment. So my question is, should transformational leaders dissociate from the role of hiring, doing performance reviews, and work promotions, and leave that to a third party?
That's an interesting question.
Mm.
So under the umbrella, I'm just going to play it back to check I've understood it. Under the umbrella of leadership and psychological safety, it feels like if leaders besides inspiring, motivating, and guiding, would also be those making decisions about promotion and pay. Is going to be my interpretation of the question. It will create a psychologically unsafe environment. That is true. I think I agree with the hypothesis there around if there is a line manager, I'm going to say line manager rather than leader, is making decisions around promotion and pay. Is that psychologically safe? I mean, I think that it definitely brings questions to bear around psychological safety, because if there's a power vested in one this has always bothered me, actually, the amount of power vested in one person to make a decision about someone's future. So I think it depends on the firm, it depends on the organization, and it depends on the process and how that's gone about as to is the power vested in one individual in a large organization, or is it more 360? Is it more 360-degree feedback? And even is there a separate, almost check and balance process around promotion and pay? So the question, should transformational leaders disassociate from the role of hiring, doing performance reviews and work promotions, and leave that to a third party? My personal view is I wouldn't leave it to a third party. I think a reflection I've had as we have multiple times going on the path from more traditional command and control line management, where a line manager makes a lot of the decisions, to autonomous teams. What I have found is that teams are, not surprisingly, by far and away, the single best mechanism for, in quotes, performance management. Teams are remarkable at self-managing, just off the chart. And this is because of evolution, because we've evolved in teams, and for our safety and our survival. And so actually, when you let the team self-solve in particular performance, what I found is teams left alone will either get behind the slowest person in the team, the slowest in quotes, get behind the person in the team that needs the help, and will get behind the slowest party up the mountain and help them up the mountain. And it could be because there's stuff going on at home outside of work, or if there's someone who genuinely is not pulling their weight and genuinely is not doing what they should be doing and kind of taking some liberties, the team will eject that person pretty quickly, if they try. Which is way better than a line manager in quotes, and combine that with team-based incentivization. My rule of thumb is 80-20. So, in terms of OKRs, objectives and key results, the team has the 80%, well, I found this to work, the same set of quarterly outcomes. 20% is the individual personal development. And then everyone has a vested interest to work together to achieve them, not individual competing against each other. So that's some thoughts from me. I don't know, Simon, Jolt, if you have anything to add.
I think this is hard, right? The stuff written around teal organizations and holacracy and self-management across the organization, there are very few organizations who've managed to succeed. Some have, but a lot of that is around organizational culture. As John said, some of the easier things to do, and they're still not particularly easy in a traditional organization, are try and move some of the performance metrics to be team-based. Some of the other things we've seen and experimented with, and to some degree successfully, is taking the line management out at least of the sort of product organization and into people who are professional line managers or team coaches. But there is absolutely no easy answer to this one. There are patterns that may or may not work, but that will be controversial and be extreme paradigm shifts from traditional organizations. Jolt.
Yeah, I can just echo. Yeah, that was a major pivot we did, actually, having team level objectives, and that it really worked. But it's non-trivial to think that way and then start using it. So it does work.
And also, I think one other thought is, I think there's, which I've just put into the chat, there's the combination of your value stream leadership and your craft leadership. So for example, in financial services, you might be aligned to mortgages, and you might be a quality specialist, a test specialist, or an engineer. So I think that's the other important dimension, is there's your craft and there's your the value stream that you're part of.
Right. Thank you, guys. That was a good question. He almost stumped you. So the next question that was over on Slack, I've just thrown into the chat. Visualization is often very useful, like visualizing work in progress. But what about the visualization of teams' products? What do you recommend, and how common is that compared to what is mostly used? Real teams have overlapping networks, and a person usually connects with many other, but often you only see a hierarchical org chart. It is similar with products and their architecture with many viewpoints. A WIP can be a user story, but that is only a small part of a product.
I saw this question earlier, and again, this is to a degree that the questioner answered a lot of his or her own question, but yes, multiple perspectives are key. One that we have found extremely useful, and it's not centered on the person, it's centered on the team, is stakeholder mapping. And there are a number of techniques that you might find useful, but just generally plotting a stakeholder map with it might be nice to have the customer at the center, but plot the map with the team at the center and look at that web of stakeholder relationships. It is clearly much more powerful than that sort of hierarchical org chart. Use it for things like, how often do we as a team interact with that stakeholder? What sort of meetings do we need to have? What sort of presentations or data do we need to take along when we have discussions with those stakeholders? Who's spoken to them last? It's becomes sort of like a customer relationship management system for the team and their stakeholders. But absolutely mapping stakeholders rather than just looking at hierarchical org chart would be my main sort of takeaway from that question.
So in terms of the work point of view, I think there is a question of WIP and user stories just being some small part of a product in the question. So this is chapter 5. In chapter 5 is a quite detailed view on delivering the right thing and mapping out your real end-to-end. So your flow of value, your value stream, your long-lived value streams, and your nested structure of that. And then a practical thing could be an OBEA wall, which is really an end-to-end view where you have the outcomes and then even the multi-year outcomes starting from the left. And then you have the different teams working on that as you go to the right, and then with all the measurements. So that's a quite useful pattern and practice to use. And then there are tools out there which can do this. We use Agile Central, for example, but many other tools can do the same.
And regarding that word network, so again, I think this is Johan, this question again, network. So value streams, as per the question, it's a value stream network. It's not. The value streams are not nice and clearly completely decoupled from all the other value streams. So the flow of value is a network, as per the question. And there are two tools that I'm aware of, which I've used in the past for social graph analysis. So to the question around who's talking to who and visualizing it, by trawling your communication channels, email, Slack, whatever, the software products will draw a social graph of who's talking to who, and that reveals the true network, as per the question. So, and that is so useful because that's your informal. That's how work actually gets done, as opposed to the official hierarchical org chart.
Great, thank you, guys. All right. This is also from Slack, and I've just thrown it into the chat. I love the story about the Boeing 737 MAX scandal and how the shift from being an engineering excellence-driven company to being a profits-driven company led to an unprecedented loss. My question is about psychological safety. In practice, how to move from a culture driven by fear to a culture driven by innovation, risk-taking, and empowerment, especially when this culture has been there for decades. In practice, how to change human behaviors.
So thanks, Noel, for your question. And I am going to quote Amy Edmondson here, who is, in my opinion, the go-to person for psychological safety. I think maybe she even came up with the term psychological safety. And that I've got two books which I reached to on my right here. One of them is Sooner, Safer, Happier, of course. And the other one is The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson. This is my second most held up book on Zoom. And so now my answer is going to be from Amy. 3 steps. Number 1, set the stage. Thanks, Leah, in the chat. So number 1, set the stage, which is you want to very intentionally change the culture from a culture of fear, from a culture of cost and schedule in the case of Boeing over safety. Incidentally, as recently as Thursday of last week, Boeing were fined $2.5 billion. Actually, that was their settlement to avoid criminal charges. And interestingly, on a tangent, the statement from Boeing from last week, they blamed 2 ex-employees, which just kaboom, my head explodes. There's still that blame culture, like blaming 2 people rather than going, yes, our culture stinks. Number 1, set the stage. So basically, we're on a journey. We want to nurture psychological safety. It isn't about blame. It isn't about personal failure. It's about the system and the system allowing things to fail. And we want to improve the system, and we're going to have a blame-free environment. Number 2, invite participation. So now people need to be very, when there's years and years of being beaten down, there's a need to very actively invite people to experiment, invite people to have intelligent failure. And I have some experience with one organization where the feedback I got as I spoke to people was that it was safer for them to do nothing than do something because of the culture of fear. If they did something, they might get beaten up, figuratively speaking. They might get given a hard time. So employees at this company would nod and smile and say, yes, we'll do this thing, and then did nothing, would do absolutely nothing. So nothing ever got done. It's quite remarkable. And that was safer for them. So you invite participation, we're changing our culture. We want you to experiment. And then you respond. Step 3 is respond well. So then when something does go wrong, when there is intelligent failure, it's celebrated, and it's celebrated as intelligent failure, and there's recognition and there's reward, and people go, oh, you know what? They didn't disappear in a cloud of smoke. It's okay. It's okay to experiment. There is a new culture here, and it will take years and years and years. It'll take a long time.
John, that sounds a lot like what you talk about in the leadership chapter about leaders lead from the front.
Totally.
Yeah, that it really, does it have to start that culture change?
Totally.
That type of an institution, does it have to start from the top?
Depends. I think
lower.
I think yes. I think the more senior a leader is in an organization, the greater their cultural shadow. And this is in the Western cultural types, which are in the book, pathological, bureaucratic, and generative. Because what happens is leaders, back to the earlier question, leaders are the ones who decide who's promoted, who gets a high performance appraisal, who gets paid more money. So the Boeing is a great example here, where the new McDonnell Douglas leadership were incentivizing hiring in their own image and incentivizing a behavior around cost and schedule over engineering excellence and safety. So this was going back a lot, as it says in the book, going back a long way, all the way back to the reverse takeover by McDonnell Douglas from the top. That was where the new culture set in. all the way back then. So yes, the more senior a leader is, the bigger their cultural lever and shadow. So absolutely, it has to be the tone from the top. Even if I have experience of one organization where there was a leader leading through fear who wasn't at the top table, but was -1. So that entire business area wouldn't improve, because they had a culture of fear. But at the same time, there wasn't quite enough action from the top table to do something about this culture over here as well. It was kind of tolerated. So yes, it really does need to be role modeled from the top. If it isn't role modeled from the top, you might have a bubble of better ways of working where there is a leader with good psychological safety. The problem is it will only ever be a bubble. That bubble will never grow to cover the whole organization.
Thank you. That was a good one. All right, here's another question that got posted on Slack today. And I saw that Simon answered it a little bit over there, but I'll just go ahead and post it for everyone here as well if we want to continue. We are pretty good at quality measure and mean time to recover, but did any of you find struggle aggregating data to put through the cycle time and flow efficiency algorithms per team?
So, yeah, so for if you go and connect the work, it could be in work management, any work management tool with the releases, whether it's ServiceNow or something else, then it enables to calculate flow efficiency, lead time, and others. Often it's not going to be one team, because it's not going to be one team delivering the entire product. So if you connect and make that primary key to connect, then it's actually across the whole end-to-end value stream. So you can connect and see actually where the handoffs are, calculate the work and wait time as well, and cycle times, and then actually you can shine the light of the whole end-to-end flow of work, flow of value.
Simon or John, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think there's two dimensions for aggregation. As Joel said, there's getting your value stream aggregation to make sure you're getting that sort of end-to-end delivery of actual value rather than just a tiny component of it. And then there's comparison. So what we have seen, and the worst pattern of this is actually managers trying to compare velocity across different teams. That is very, very much an anti-pattern. But frankly, even trying to compare absolute cycle time or flow time across teams it's not great. The thing that you do want to expect that all teams are aiming for is a relative improvement. So looking at, say, 25% improvement in cycle time over a 6-month period, that's, again, depending on context, that might be an awesome thing that you might like to set as a target, and not an outcome target, but at least an output target for most of your teams. But expecting everybody to have a cycle time of a week is probably unrealistic, at least for sort of long-lived organizations.
And I think there's a correlation here with the technical architecture as well, and Conway's law.
Yeah.
Because if you've got small teams on small components, you probably can quite easily measure at the team level. But if you've got a monolithic ball of mud, with a bunch of theoretically agile teams, it's going to be very difficult to get the data at the team level. So I think there's a correlation to technical architecture.
Great, thank you guys. All right. Now I just wanted to wrap up this lovely AMA with you guys. Thank you again for joining. With going back towards the chapter that we're going to be talking about today in the discussions channel, which is chapter 4, and it's the leadership chapter. We touched on it just a little bit earlier, but there are so many books out there about leadership, like a huge number of books out there. And there's plenty of people out there who believe themselves to be good leaders. And there's a lot of misconceptions around leadership. So if you could have one thing that you really want readers to pull from your leadership chapter and take away with them, what do you think that would be in terms of being a great leader?
So in terms of the leadership chapter and one takeaway in being a great leader, I think in the leadership leading for better value, sooner, safer, happier talk that I gave at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, I ended with a one-liner, which is leadership is how you leave people feeling. So that would be my one takeaway. Leadership is how you leave people feeling.
I like that one. I hadn't heard that one before. Simon or Joel, do you have anything to add to that?
I think the one thing I would add is we've taken a lot of inspiration from the book Turn the Ship Around, and effectively the reason that the book is targeted for leaders at all levels is that, well, we see leadership as something that should happen at all levels, that decisions that you think you should escalate up actually we believe should be taken at the appropriate level, and that leadership is as much about delegating responsibility down to the most appropriate level than holding on to leadership as at a higher and higher and higher level. There's a book that inspired me many years ago, Henry Mintzberg's Managers Not MBAs, which said one of the best things organizations can do is turn their organizational structures, instead of going from bottom to top, do it at the side, because the people at effectively at the bottom of the hierarchy, they're the ones who are doing the work, they're the ones who are really running the organization. The ones to the side, they're supporting them in doing that.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with that, and this is strongly connected to chapter 8 as well. If the right conditions are established, then teams gonna self-organize and teams gonna do awesome things, and that's so needed from the leadership.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Now we just had one more question pop up over in Slack, and I think we've got the time to answer it if you guys are willing. It moves forward to chapter 5. The first topic that I had a bit of a hesitant reaction to was the title or naming of roles to value outcome lead, team outcome lead, etc. Did you find they had a negative effect similar to the Big Bang T changing titles and not changing anything else?
Thank you for the question, Dean. That's a good question. The first thought that springs to my mind is whatever they're called, whether it's product owner, scrum master, or value outcome lead, and team outcome lead, or anything. Yes, if it's done badly, and if it's done as a role name change that in a big bang manner, then yes, that's a bad thing. Doesn't matter whether they're called apples and oranges. If it's changing the job title and very little else, that's not a good approach. So the intent and the philosophy and the mindset behind it is that it's in line with the rest of the book, which is think big, start small, learn fast, starting small, not just changing the job roles. And actually in some cases, which I think is articulated earlier in the book, which is in some cases it is taking more of the Kanban method value approach, which is honor the current roles and responsibilities and pursue evolutionary improvement without changing job titles. So it's a case of, back to context is unique, and this is in chapter 3. In terms of unique context, if the context is such that there's been some previous failed capital A, capital T agile transformations, there's baggage, I would not change the job titles. And we have had success by doing exactly that, by leaving the job titles intact, leaving the reporting lines intact, and just focusing on quality, value, flow, safety, and happiness, and letting people use their own brains to improve improve on those outcomes. And what that business area ended up doing was effectively exhibiting agile ways of working, but not coming at it with agile and scrum and product owner and scrum master. So it is all about how you use how you approach it. One other thought, which was kind of behind that language around value outcome lead and team outcome lead. Personally, I believe that language like product owner and Scrum Master is out of date. It's from the early 1990s, and I've done a number of sessions with with large groups of product owners, either in an internal company conference or internal company sessions. And when I speak to a room full of product owners, the general feedback I get is, yeah, we keep forgetting to speak to the customer. And yeah, you know what, really, I'm just still a project manager. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where I own the goddamn product. I'm the product owner, command and control. I'm going to determine what's next in the backlog, kind of thing. So that's part of the spirit of changing the language. Same for Scrum Master. What happened to the Scrum slaves? It's not about Scrum, and it's not about being a master, for God's sake. It's about being a servant leader. And it's about outcomes. So that's the logic. That's the theory behind that language, value outcome lead, which is we're leading on value outcomes, and team outcome lead, which is I'm here to help the team outcomes. That's some of the philosophy. I don't know, Simon or Joel, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think we flipped between, I think in our discussions, we still flip between, we had to settle on one in the book, between value outcome coach and value outcome lead. We were sort of very inspired in our discussions here by the old sort of extreme programming role of coach. We talk about three key roles in any team, one to do with the value, one to do with the sort of team and process. The value sort of correlates with the product owner, the team sort of correlates with the Scrum Master, and then there's the third role, which we were inspired by Discipline Agile, saying actually somebody needs that technology leadership as well. Discipline Agile calls it the architecture owner role, and again in the same sort of philosophy and inspired by XP, we say no, that you're the technical coach. Ownership, we say, for all of these things, actually in a super well-performing team, the ownership is with the team. The ownership of the values with the team, the ownership of the processes with the team, and the ownership of the technical architecture is with the team. But there are people who we believe sort of carry that beacon in the same way XP does, as the technical coach is probably the more senior person who is coaching the rest of the team to do technical architecture well. The same we see with product owners. What were product owners? They're coaching the team to understand the value that they're giving to the customer and to the business. And the team outcome lead is coaching the team on how a team performs well, what sort of ceremonies they need to do, what sort of ceremonies they don't need to do, how to remove impact. So it's that philosophy, which I think sort of connects back to the question earlier about that hierarchical view of product owner, Scrum Master, lead architect, more to it's a team. The team is the thing that delivers best. And actually, we're just coaching the team to do these three things of value, process, and technology super well.
I think everyone enjoyed
Thanks,
that.
Dean.
That was very good. And that's a nice way to wrap up this first AMA, I think.
Lee,
Was there another comment?
Yeah, I can see that Phil is typing.
Ah.
I can see Phil. There we go. T-shaped skill evolution. Okay, good. I wasn't sure, Phil, if you had another question.
No worries. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Wonderful conversation this morning. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of our audience for asking such wonderful questions to lead to such good discussions. We'll be continuing over in the discussions channel today, talking about chapter 4 and posting some videos as well. And we'll be having some more of these Zoom AMAs next week. And the lovely authors will be back with us on Slack tomorrow morning for some questions as well. So thank you once again, and everyone have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.